Hello, everyone. It's a new episode of JSP Coffee Podcast, and today I have a new exciting guest joining me for conversation about AI, Zach Rattner. He's a CTO and co-founder of Yembo AI. It's AI-powered tool for property inspections. Also, he is known as an author of Grow Up Fast, Lesson from AI Startup, and also he is an international keynote speaker. So today our conversation will be about implementation of AI technologies into the tech products. Is it challenging? What are the typical mistakes and how to avoid them? Hello, Zach. Nice to have you in my podcast.
Good morning, Olga. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you on my podcast. And probably I decided to have this conversation all about AI technology, but from the perspective of business owner. And implementation of this technology into your product, because like as far as I can see right now, more and more businesses after we um, like all the people are trying to use ChatGPT in everyday life, and people decided that it's really good to have this technology into their product as well. So my first question will be, what opportunities do AI provide for tech businesses in general? Like what they can do and where exactly they can implement it.
The impact I see AI having in tech businesses is fairly profound. We have a rare opportunity right now to reinvent the way a lot of work gets done. And for the longest time, we had these models around work being something that would take a predictable amount of time to get things done. From the Industrial Revolution era, the idea of the wage worker, where you exchange time for dollars, all of these things are being able to be kind of upended right now, where there are a lot of tasks that used to be very tedious, very complicated, and now they can be done in near real time automatically. The promise that AI brings, and it allows us to kind of rethink the way that work gets done and rethink the way that our products get delivered and rethink the way that our customers are going to actually come to work and the things that they do in their days. So I'm overall pretty excited about it. But it's not just something that is a little bit better. It's something that kind of fundamentally recreates the way work gets done.
Why do you think this exact booming of AI technologies happened in 2023? Because, like, as far as I know, the technology was developed way before the 2023. But why the booming exactly this year?
Sure, 2023 was certainly a banner year. And from what I've seen so far of 2024, it doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. But you're exactly right. This didn't just happen overnight. There was groundwork that was laid over decades that kind of made 2023 possible. I see it as kind of the intersection of three different things. There's the proliferation of data in the cloud. All these AI algorithms, we'll get into this later, but you have to train them on huge amounts of data. And having companies that in the early 20 or 2000s allowed people to upload content. So think Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, these kinds of companies. Decade goes by and now they're sitting on reams and reams of data, which is exactly what you need to make these algorithms work. On top of that, there's been a precipitous drop in the price of compute. So GPUs are capable of doing things that were unfathomable even 20, 10 years ago. And that makes it possible to experiment with things that maybe the algorithms were known, but it was just computationally infeasible to do earlier. And then the third one is this kind of makes a gold rush, and there has been a lot of academic R&D money poured into fundamental research. But I think you wouldn't have those unless you had the previous two. So increase in data, decrease in compute cost, and then academic interest. I think the three of those come together, and then 2023 happens.
Yeah, I agree too. When you were developing Yambo, your product, what primary task did you aim to solve with your product? Like, what was the main idea, and how you come up with this idea, probably?
Sure. So my wife was working at a large international moving company, and when I learned more about that space, it was really fascinating. As in the moving industry, it's very logistically complicated and it's very difficult to get any amount of benefit from automation. If I want to move you, traditionally the way that works is somebody will ring a doorbell, schedule an appointment, show up at your house, identify things, write them down on a clipboard, and that's really critical for giving an accurate quote because you'll need to be able to see what the person has to know what equipment to bring, what size truck, how many crew members. If it's an international shipment, you'll need to deal with customs as well. And you'll need to do things like declare the serial numbers of all your electronics. So it's just very complicated and labor intensive. And when you look at this sales process, it's the same customers that are watching videos on Netflix, buying things on Amazon Prime. And it just seemed kind of incongruous to me that if I buy like a $2-3 toothbrush on Amazon, I can track it. It shows up at my house the next day or two. But if I need to move everything I own, these processes are just very long and very complicated. And when we zoomed in on what exactly is happening in that sales process, we found there's a uniquely human aspect of it that we don't take away. That is building rapport with the client, explaining the services that are offered, making sure that we're giving them the right things that they need for their move. But there's also a lot of really tedious things. Like if you were to move me, how many cartons would it take to put these books in a box? And if you look at a typical moving sales call, they can take 60 to 90 minutes. And a lot of that time is spent on the how many cartons, okay, can you show me your basement, walk around in your garage? So what AI allows us to do is it allows us to free up those aspects of the call so that the sales agent can have a great experience to their customer. They can focus on the more impactful things, building connections, understanding their specific needs, and they don't have to go and ask questions like, how many boxes is it going to take to fit your living room? That's really where AI, I feel, accelerates things and fundamentally changes the way that work gets done. Whereas before, a sales call was something that would take a really long time. Person is maybe in the home with an iPad or a pen and paper, or if they're doing it over like a Zoom or FaceTime type thing, they may have like Excel open and they're trying to type down all the numbers. But with AI, you can actually get pictures of the items that are there. You can have a shorter call. You can focus more on the value added things and less on the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I think even in the end, after the person will come to your house and check everything, there will still be some misunderstandings, or they will forget to bring enough boxes for everything.
For
So
sure.
here it's like you are able to have everything pictured before, and everything stored even. So
For
it's
sure.
much
Yeah. And I think that's
easier.
pretty key is if you look at here in the US, we have this concept of the Better Business Bureau. So it's a rating agency that'll file complaints and give scores to different types of businesses. And moving, unfortunately, is like in the bottom 5 or 10. It changes year over year, but it's usually bottom 5 or 10 in terms of like most complained about by consumers. But it's not for lack of trying. I mean, it's just this is a very complicated process. Customers are at a really stressful point in time in their lives. They're usually uprooting everything, saying goodbye to friends, and it's a just difficult time. So we saw an opportunity where we can help these best in class movers provide a better experience because when you go and you look at the reasons that people complain, they're totally solvable and addressable with technology. There are things around, hey, the estimate was inaccurate, or the mover brought the wrong number of cartons because they didn't count correctly because I changed my mind at the last minute and ended up needing to move more things. And I kind of like problems like that. So that's why the more we learned about this space, we got really excited because we realized we can really help here. And it's also not just moving. If you look at all other home services, plumbers and painters and property insurance and these other areas, people generally need to go to your house to give a price quote because it's not a one size fits all product. And you can't just like put it in your cart and check out. You need to inspect to understand what you're up against. And that's where computer vision technology can help.
Yeah, and also like waste of the time, and probably you will need to pay salary for the person to come just to see your apartment or house. As far as I understand, like this product is fully AI powered. So like you like have application, you make pictures or videos. It's analyzed by AI, and in the end, probably you have some numbers about like square meters of your apartment, how many items you need to bring. So how much time did it take exactly for you to train AI to understand like all the whether it's a furniture or it's a book, like in this means.
Sure. So I'm taking that as permission to nerd out a little bit and kind of go a layer deeper. It is something that is completely ongoing. We were incorporated in 2016. Here we are in 2024. We're still training the AI. So it's never quite done. If you think of like a self-driving car type problem, I think it illustrates just the nature of AI. Is it's relatively easy to build a self-driving car that can go in a straight line down a highway when the lanes are clearly marked. But then real world driving has weather and bends in the road, and sometimes the lines aren't there, and you have pedestrians and you have traffic and you have accidents and all these other complications that come up. And that's why we're just now starting to see self-driving cars hit the road when we've been talking about it for, gosh, probably more than a decade. And it's relatively easy in machine learning to make a proof of concept or a prototype or something that's like 70-80% accurate. But to really get it to the point where it can be autonomous is really, really difficult. So in our world, when we first launched the product, you can imagine inside somebody's home, there are hundreds of different potential items. And we realized pretty quickly that if our business model was predicated on getting 100% of everything exactly like a person would, perfect on day one, we would run out of time before we'd be able to put a product together and hit the market. So what we did was we decided to focus on building an intellectually honest value proposition to a customer so they get value out of the product before the AI was mature. And I would argue, looking back, that was really a key decision to be able to get embedded in the workflow. So in our world, we were replacing an in-person visit with a virtual one. So the mover could send a link, customer record quick videos, AI would process it, they'd review it, and they can give a quote back. And I would the killer use case that we had was we give this thing called a visual inventory, and the visual inventory has actual pictures of the items that are being moved, so crews can prepare better. It's more collaborative around what specific needs the item may have. Sometimes things like TVs need to be packed specially, so just being able to see it is a lot more valuable than just seeing on a spreadsheet carton or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were able to do is we had this output that you could get that you could only get through Yembo, that competitors couldn't offer, that the industry hadn't really seen before, that was really valuable. And we were able to save the drive, the in-person visit. So there were time savings. They just weren't as pronounced because the AI could detect like 5 items, 10 items. And what we did is we gradually worked our way up to the point where we can work in every room now, but we didn't do it all at once. And what we were also able to do is we were to focus our efforts on the more common items. So because people were using the system, we could see, hey, people are spending more times dealing with fireplaces being misdetected as microwave ovens, and us not being able to detect cat towers and barbecue grills. Like, that's less important. There's an actual debate we had internally maybe like 3-4 years ago. And we concluded that we need to focus on being able to discern fireplaces from microwaves, and like went and built and trained AI for that. So having this iteration and monitoring and watching, I think, is really key, because the thing to remember is these algorithms are biologically inspired. So if you think about how you learned a task, you don't generally just like look at a book, poof, you know it. It takes time. You need to learn, you need to practice, you need to observe edge cases that come up in the field. And we did what I think a lot of startups would do, is you kind of build a workflow around progressive iteration and constant learning. And that gets you where you need to go, as opposed to just training one model, boom, you're done. And then you never have to look at it again.
You already mentioned that probably the product was developed in 2016, right?
Yeah, we incorporated it in 2016. We didn't
So,
launch to customers till around late 2018, 2019. So it took a while to get it up and running off the ground.
yeah, so probably it's already like couple years past, and like if you look back, what exactly you think you might have been done differently? Like maybe testing period, you might like spend more time testing, or deciding to add some features that you in the future decided they are not good and customers don't use them. So what like exactly you have been done differently right now?
Sure. Looking back, I think there are a lot of things that the pace of innovation is changing so quickly that the world is just very different now than it was 2016. Um, I would have spent a lot less time on tooling and infrastructure. There's a lot of more mature things that are available now that weren't then. Just to give an example, just to deploy this thing and have it live, 2016, we started setting things up. There weren't mature frameworks on running GPUs in the cloud. There were bits and pieces here and there, but you had to compile low-level drivers yourself. You had to deal with it going down more often than non-GPU machines. So there are a lot of just maturity that's come with the field growing over the past few years that I probably wouldn't have spent as much time building our own internal annotation tools, testing tools. There's just a whole lot more out there. And then what I would have done with that time instead is I would have focused probably 2-3 times as much as I would on exploring new use cases. When it's so expensive and time consuming to train, it can take weeks or even months to train a model, depending on how many parameters and things along these lines and how good your GPUs are. But in order to make that work, the baseline of what you needed to do was just so high that there wasn't a whole lot of time left over to do other things. So as a result, we were fairly conservative when we decided to train a model to detect something. Like I mentioned, we had to look at, hey, this is slowing down a review by so many minutes. And we'd have to have metrics like that just because it was so cost intensive. So now that the costs are coming down, tooling getting better, it kind of encourages you to be able to experiment a bit more and not have to have such a high level of conviction that I'm going to see ROI on this in a matter of days. Otherwise, I won't do it. And I think that makes the world a lot more interesting place because it allows talented engineers to experiment and to see what works and what solves customer problems. Otherwise, people get discouraged from trying things because you don't want to be the guy who wasted a couple months of computer training time.
For example, I'm a tech business owner, and I decided that I need AI technologies into my implementation into my products. What are exactly the features worth adding to the product, and what should be avoided?
Sure. I think the main thing to remember with AI is it is really good at certain areas. It's good at detecting items. It's good at analyzing text. It's good at even generating text now. But these fundamental algorithms are all based on probabilities. So the number one word of warning I would give is think about the case when it's wrong. Because by definition, it's not going to say I'm 100% sure I'm looking at X. It's going to say I'm X% sure. And then in your use case, if it's a self-driving car, you maybe want to be pretty sure that if it's a pedestrian, that you handle that. It's like it's much better to brake when you don't have to than not brake when you should have. Fortunately, in Yembo, we're identifying furniture. The stakes aren't so high, but still, you need to think about the case where it's wrong. We wouldn't want to give like an immediate binding quote without asking for anybody to give any confirmation before a job is sent, for instance. So I'd think through those cases. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's really, I would say, relatively simple to get something that works as like a proof of concept, something that's 80% there. And I'd recommend start at those use cases where that's okay. If you look at this era of AI that's been kind of coming out the last 6-12 months or so, there's been a big focus on co-pilot technology. And this is the idea of how our industry is kind of grappling with the fact that AI is not always perfect. So I'm not going to be an autonomous agent that replies to your emails, schedules your calls, joins calls, does things on your behalf quite yet. Maybe we'll get there. But right now, people don't really trust it because it makes mistakes, it hallucinates their issues. So this co-pilot concept is maybe I will suggest a response to your email, or maybe I will give you a summary of the call, and you can go click and watch the whole transcript if you want. But the idea is that we're moving generally from this idea of artificial narrow intelligence, where AI can do like individual tasks, to artificial general intelligence, where AI can behave broadly like a person would. But we're not quite at that point yet where a person is exactly being matched. And that's why these ideas of co-pilots, thinking through the downsides of how do you handle if it's not correct, and maybe just using off-the-shelf technology like ChatGPT to try things out and experiment. I think that idea of like experimenting, figuring out where the value is, and then doubling down once you see something working is a general strategy that I've seen work, not just at my company, but just in the industry in general.
Yeah. What exact aspects of the product I can enhance with AI technologies?
So what AI does in general is it takes a process that used to be very tedious and complicated, and it accelerates it to the point where it's abundant and in some cases near free to do. And I would say the best AI products take advantage of that and provide something of value to the person. So if you look at, for example, we brought up self-driving cars, it's kind of tedious to take a 6-hour road trip, eyes on the road, hands on the wheel. So the promise of AI doing that for me, so the interior of my car can look like a living room and less so like a car, is pretty compelling because the AI is taking that part away from me. It's a part that a lot of people don't seem to enjoy having. And when you look at these different use cases in business to business applications, business to consumer, a lot of the times there are these similar parallels where there's a process that analyzing large amounts of data, preparing for something where you want to go do market research, maybe preparing for a JetSoftPro podcast where you give me a list of the people that have been on before, watch a couple, but hey, you can transcribe all of them, summarize it into bullet points, and I can feel like I've watched 100 episodes when in reality I watched maybe 3 or 4. But these are use cases where it just, no one has the time, right, to go watch 100 podcast episodes to prepare for a 30-minute conversation. But with AI, you can do things like that. And I think that's what gets really exciting, where there are all these things that people haven't really considered because they just assumed that would take too long. But AI makes it possible. We have also seen that in our visual inventory. One of our first deployments, we had a complicated international move. And when you're moving international, usually there are 2 moving companies involved. There's the origin and destination, because usually the company is not present all over the world. So what happened was we had a customer in the US. They used Yembo. They made that visual PDF, and it actually had all the pictures of all the items being moved. And then it was an international move, so they sent it ahead to the destination, and the agent at the destination was using it like a checklist. So as the items were coming off the truck, they were crossing off as they went, and they made sure that they got everything that went in. And they had this funny comment. They came to us afterwards, and they said, who on earth has the time? Because they were looking at this picture. They didn't know that AI had built it. They thought someone had just like painstakingly gone and taken a photo of like 300-400 items in someone's home. And they concluded, like, who has the time? And I think those are the kinds of applications that AI is going to create more and more of, is you'll do things that without having AI, you'll conclude who has the time, and you maybe wouldn't even pursue it. So that's why I'm fairly bullish on the technology. That's why I'm really excited to see where it's going, because it just doesn't feel like these other waves of technology that we've run in the past, where like cryptocurrency kind of came and went. There's these other kind of trends that came and went, but this one has got some substance to it. It's fundamentally accelerating things, allowing us to reinvent the way that work gets done, and that's been pretty compelling and pretty exciting just to see in the few years since this stuff has come out, just how rapidly the world's been changing.
As you mentioned before, like that probably right now you're still working at AI in a sense, like you're still training it, developing some features and making sure it analyzes properly images. So probably how much time it will take to train, I guess it's like never ending process. But is it expensive to train AI, and what exactly resources you need to have like AI developers, and if it's like never stopping process, so you still need to have some developer in your team that will work on it on daily basis.
Yeah, so to give a hard answer, there's no one fixed thing. It depends on a lot of different things that you're doing. Object detection is different than like transformers, which is different than diffusers. But I think in general, I can tell you the fundamental building blocks, and you can, if you got a use case in mind, use it to fill in the blanks. If you want to have a standard web server hosted on AWS, no AI, just a standard like Linux-based web server, I don't know, like 4-8 gigs of RAM, whatever. It'll cost anywhere between like maybe $20 and $30 a month to run that service. If you need to attach a GPU to it, the graphics processor, which is kind of the engine that makes these AI applications work, your minimum goes up to be about $500 a month for the smallest, most basic unit, just one GPU. Now there are ways that you can pre-order, get the cost down. There's always new items coming up. So maybe by the time this episode airs, there'll be something newer that comes down. But just generally speaking, you're looking at an order of magnitude increase in infrastructure costs just to have the thing running. And then in terms of training, it really depends on what you're trying to do. But usually training time is measured in days or weeks, not minutes and hours. So that means that if you are attempting to train some new AI, you're not going to know if your decision was right or wrong until you've run one of these really expensive servers for a good amount of time. And then you have to evaluate it. Because again, everything's probability based. So you'll get the answers back and you'll see maybe you don't like them. You have to fine tune some other things. So I would suggest not going down that path until you're like really sure that you need to do it, because it can get very time intensive for engineering staff, and then also just equipment expensive because you got to go and get all these servers that are very scarce and are often sold out because a lot of other companies are also trying to do these things. But that's where the use case kind of drives it, where if you have conviction and you know that this is going to be worth doing, it's like okay to go ahead and go down that route and make it happen. But if you're new to this space, I would recommend playing around with state-of-the-art tools. Go use ChatGPT, go download some open source models, get a sense for what it can and cannot do. And then once you're convinced that the tech is kind of heading in the right direction, then you can double down and go do it. Because if you just jump straight to like, hey, I need to go train my own custom model, like you're going to the most complicated, expensive part of the process. And if you skip the validation step, there's substantial risk that you'll get what you want. You'll get the output, but it may not be what you wanted. And then you're back to square one.
For example, I decided that I want to develop my own AI model. What business challenges may I face during development, and how can I avoid them? As far as just mentioned before, that you can just try open source first and see what works, and if it works at least somehow good for you, you can go deeper. But what exactly more problems I can face too during development?
I think perhaps a more important problem than that technical one we talked about is the humanities aspect of it, where AI, remember, it gets things wrong, and it's always been trained on a data set. As far as we have today, there aren't algorithms out there that just know things and can reason like a human can. So human beings decided, hey, let's build an airplane because gliders existed, internal combustion engines existed. They kind of pieced the things together and came up with this new concept. It's brilliant. It's what makes humans go. It's nothing like what the current state of AI technology is doing. Current state of AI technology, yeah, it can draw a picture of an airplane, but it's because we showed it tens of thousands of examples of images of airplanes, and that's why it's discerning these things. When starting a project, I think before you even write a single line of code, think through the data sets that are going into train. The closer they are to the actual deployments, the better. So there are substantial risks that you may have biases in your data set, that you may present the AI output in a way that is much more confident than the reality behind it would be. That's why LLMs hallucinating is a big issue, is it looks really compelling, and then it takes a lot of effort on the human to go dig and research and realize, hey, this is actually completely made up. So I would think through those use cases early on. And that's why I see a much more proliferation in these co-pilot use cases than the autonomous agent use cases, because the risks are so much higher in an autonomous agent. If I'm going to go make a phone call on my behalf and tell somebody something, I don't want it hallucinating. I want to be able to like know it would behave exactly like I would. And that's why like suggesting things to me and letting me go do it is something that's much more compelling. So I would argue or encourage and advocate for starting out the project, assume it will be wrong some percentage of the time, think about how you handle those things, and then make sure that the use case that you're going after has the realistic settings that the data that's being trained on comes in. If you take, in our world, a bunch of videos that were trained in the interior of homes and you try to go on the surface of the moon or in a baseball stadium, like you'll run into these problems because the deployments look nothing like what the training data came from. And I think if you're not super in the details of how these models are working, it can be easy to overlook that and just think, oh, well, the AI knows how to do X, so I can just do X anywhere. But the nuances sometimes, like they say, devil's in the details, right? And that's certainly true in AI.
In your opinion, what revolutionized AI technologies will emerge this year? Like 2024 will definitely be the year of AI technologies as well, I guess. Nothing will change in this area in means of popularity. But what exactly you think might be new in this field?
I certainly think we're going to get lots of new stuff. We have a lot of bright people working in the industry, a lot of investment dollars being poured in. Even companies that hadn't traditionally been technology companies or AI companies are spinning up new departments, divisions. So I certainly think 2024 is going to bring in a new wave of products. And I mean, the prediction world is always very risky, but I'll go ahead and bite. This may or may not age well, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, if you look at the spectrum, we kind of touched on this before. There's artificial narrow intelligence where AI can do one particular task very well. Then, kind of midpoint along the way, we have artificial general intelligence where the capabilities match that of a human. Then, far end on the other end of the spectrum, there's artificial super intelligence, whereas the AI exceeds a human generally in all tasks. Um, we're somewhere getting off the first point, starting to look at the second one now. I would say ChatGPT was probably the first consumer product that looked and behaved a lot like artificial general intelligence, where it wasn't trying to do just one thing. You can talk to it about philosophy, math, science. You ask it to write code, ask it to write poetry. It's very generally capable. But the issue is, if you like dig a layer deeper, it hallucinates. It has downtime. It's not really as smart as a person, I would say. And I think we'll start seeing use cases nudging more and more in that direction. Now, the pace and timing and exactly what that looks like, I don't know exactly. But I think we'll be getting away from having to hand engineer like one particular use case, and we'll be able to have more and more generalized agents. And I do think we'll get to a point where we'll probably have agents acting on our behalf. I just think as a society, we're going to have to be really comfortable with that. And um, just like if you hired a employee, you don't just like give them the most complicated use cases on day one of the job. You go through a process where they get trained, and then once they've demonstrated capabilities and competence, then you give them the larger tasks. And I think AI is still in that like if they were to be an employee the first 30 days on the job where they're still learning the ropes and they're not quite autonomous yet.
But do you think, like, I guess the biggest problem is right now is that it cannot take decisions, so it can just like provide you with some numbers, what likely will happen or not happen, but it will not take any decision itself. Will it be also possible changes in this way? So, like, it take will prediction numbers, and you might train him. For example, if the prediction is about 90%, this will happen. You can take this decision, or it
Mm-hmm.
will still will more like the human will decide. Never AI will decide for the human.
Yeah, I mean, again, never say never, right? But I think until we see demonstrations of AI like surpassing humans and there being, I think at some point it'll probably be considered irresponsible to not use AI. Like if it really was exceeding human capabilities, it sort of becomes like a seatbelt, right? Like why would you not want to put this thing on? But I don't think we're there yet. I think that's flipped, and there's more risk if you do use it than if you don't. But I think in terms of where we are right now, the idea of having an AI agent, I certainly think that we are going to have that, and you can even do this today. Nobody likes having their ideas shot down, and people don't like coming across as unprepared. Um, you can take a presentation that you're working on, and you can go ask ChatGPT. Imagine you're the VP of the department and you tear this presentation to shreds. Give me some negative feedback, and you can like practice beforehand before you go into a real situation, or you can explain a situation and do scenario modeling and ask it like, what are 3 4 ways that this could play out? And I see that being available today, where you sort of use AI to help you become more prepared, more thoughtful. You can think through different things in places that you wouldn't have otherwise. It's sort of like a intellectual sparring partner before you as the human go and make the big decision. Down the road, maybe in the world of sci-fi, I could see there being agents where you don't need the human in the loop, but I think there's a lot of societal risk to that. People probably won't want it. And I honestly don't think that's super close in terms of technology. I think we've gotten really good at mimicking what humans can do, but I haven't seen a lot of evidence that suggests that we are rivaling the ability for a human being to reason, to think through consequences, to really like understand what it takes to make a good decision. I think a lot of what people do is just repetitive, and that's why things like next token prediction and ChatGPT looks like it's really smart. But under the hood, what it's really doing is it's looking at a sequence of characters and it's predicting what the next one is going to be, and that's about it. It's not really reasoning. So I do think we'll get there, but I think it'll be co-pilots to human beings for the foreseeable future, and some point down the road, maybe possibly, but I don't see that happening imminently. And again, maybe this episode won't age well and you'll throw it back in my face in a few months, but that's kind of what I see based on the understanding of the technology today.
Thank you for this conversation. I hope you enjoyed my questions. And thank you for being with me today.
Okay, thank you, Olga. I really appreciated it. Have a good rest of your day, and looking forward to seeing the episode air.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed our podcast session, and also if you like it, please don't forget to press a thumbs up button below and share it with your friends. Also, you're welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay tuned. Bye!